Welcome back to our quiet corner of the garden. Have you ever looked at a tired tomato plant or a patch of dry earth and felt that something deeper was missing? It isn't just another bag of fertilizer, but a way of gardening our grandparents seemed to understand instinctively. During World War II, families across the country relied on a soil secret so powerful that it could triple a harvest without a single chemical input. These tiny victory gardens grew nearly 40% of America's vegetables in 1943, right in the middle of rationing, fear, and uncertainty. Ordinary people using simple wisdom produced more food per square foot than many industrial farms do today. So why then have these methods vanished? Because in 1947, the factories that once made nitrogen for bombs began making nitrogen for fields. And slowly we were taught to depend on fertilizer bags instead of living soil. What once grew freely from nature became something we were told to buy, but not anymore. Today we are uncovering those buried secrets, the effortless chop and drop method, the forest's own soil inoculation, and the living partnerships beneath our feet that cost nothing and restore everything. These are tools our elders trusted, tools powerful enough to rebuild any garden anywhere. So friends, are you ready to reclaim the wisdom they hoped we'd forget? Let's step back into the history of the Victory Garden and rediscover the living earth waiting beneath our hands. To understand why so much of our modern soil feels tired, depleted, or simply empty, we have to go back to a moment in history that most gardeners never hear about. The year was 1945 when World War II ended. The United States was left with 10 enormous factories built for one purpose: producing ammonia for munitions. Ammonia at its core is nitrogen. It fuels explosions, but it also fuels fast, leafy plant growth. Suddenly the war was over. The bombs stopped, but the factories didn't. They were capable of producing 1.6 million tons of ammonia every single year, and the industry now faced a monumental decision: shut the factories down or find a new enemy. They chose the soil. Almost overnight, the same ammonium nitrate once used in explosives was repackaged into bright, shiny pellets and sold as fertilizer. The story we were told was simple. This was progress, this was modern farming, this was the miracle our gardens had been waiting for. But friends, before this chemical flood, we nourished the earth with time-tested ways: rotating crops, planting legumes to fix nitrogen, and letting roots and microbes work together as nature intended. Plants grew slowly, but they grew strong. Soil rested, healed, and regenerated. The new system made everything appear greener and faster, but what they didn't tell us was that nitrogen alone is not enough. Plants require at least 16 essential nutrients, not just the famous NPK stamped on every bag at the store. By drowning the soil in synthetic nitrogen, we burned out the carbon, destroyed fungal networks, and starved the very microorganisms that make soil truly alive. This wasn't an upgrade, it was a takeover. And here's the part that still surprises many people. Modern pesticides didn't begin in the garden. They were born from wartime research into nerve gases like sarin. After the war, the battlefield simply shifted. We moved from fighting nations to fighting the biology of our own backyards. But the old Victory Garden secret reminds us of something powerful. Nature never needed a war with itself. Life thrives not through force, but through partnership. If we return to the methods our grandparents trusted, methods rooted in biology, community, and living soil, our gardens will thrive again without a single chemical grenade. Let's turn now to one of the simplest yet most liberating secrets of all: the chop and drop method. This idea didn't come from laboratories or corporations. It came from observation by ordinary people living through extraordinary times. During the war, gardeners in bombed-out cities didn't have stores to run to or mulch bags lined up on shelves. They had to look to the one teacher that had never failed humanity: the forest. In the forest, they noticed something beautifully consistent. Nature never ever leaves the soil bare. Every leaf, every fallen stem, and every blade of grass is left exactly where it lands, slowly becoming the next generation's food. Victory gardeners followed this wisdom. When a plant finished producing, they didn't yank it out by the roots, a habit that Masanobu Fukuoka later called a disaster for the soil's inner structure. Instead, they simply cut the plant at soil level and let it fall. Chop and drop. It is a gesture so small yet so powerful because when you do this, you create what gardeners came to call the living blanket, a soft natural cover that shields the earth from scorching sun and wind, keeping precious moisture in place and denying weed seeds the light they need to sprout. In many gardens, this simple layer can reduce evaporation by more than 70%. And there's something even more important happening beneath that blanket. When you leave the roots where they are, you protect the delicate network of fungal threads, burrows, and microscopic pathways that plants depend on. As those roots decay, they become tiny highways for air and water, opening the soil, feeding the microbes, and creating a structure no tool can build. Then the magic begins. Earthworms rise toward the feast. They pull down the chopped leaves, the dried stems, and the withered vines. And in exchange, they give us the richest fertilizer nature knows, worm castings. What we often call garden waste becomes the fuel of life, transformed effortlessly by creatures who have been perfecting this job for hundreds of millions of years. Yet for decades, the gardening industry told us to clean all of this away, strip the soil bare, bag up the debris, haul it to the curb, and then, of course, buy back the very nutrients we had thrown out. But here's the freedom in this forgotten wartime secret. You don't need to fight nature. You just need to imitate her. Gravity does the work. Biology does the work. You simply stand beside the process and let it unfold. So the next time a plant finishes its season, pause before pulling. Look at the soil. Look at the life waiting just beneath it, and remember the lesson our elders learned under the hardest conditions. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your garden is to let things fall exactly where they are. Have you ever stepped into a deep, old forest and paused as that sweet, earthy scent rises from the ground? It feels ancient, comforting, almost sacred. That aroma is more than just soil. It is the smell of a living operating system, nature's original engine of fertility. During the war, when many gardens were exhausted from years of poor farming practices, people discovered a quiet technique that changed everything. They called it forest soil transfer. Unlike modern methods, it required no machinery, no chemicals, and no trips to the store. All it needed was a handful. Gardeners didn't haul home truckloads of dirt. They simply brushed aside the leaves in a healthy forest, reached down, and gathered a small amount of the dark, crumbly soil found beneath the litter. This was the heart of what we today call indigenous microorganisms, or IMO for short. Inside that tiny handful were billions of bacteria and thousands of species of fungi, each one perfectly adapted to local weather, local pests, and local plants. When this forest soil was sprinkled onto a tired garden bed, it acted like an inoculation, a gentle awakening, introducing a whole community of microscopic warriors ready to rebuild the earth. And then came one of the most remarkable wartime discoveries of all, the rice box secret. To multiply these beneficial microbes, gardeners placed cooked rice in a wooden box and buried it beneath the forest floor for a few days. When they returned, the rice was covered in a soft white mold. But this wasn't decay. This was IMO1, a highly concentrated dose of the forest's own living network, the hidden wood-wide web brought home in a single box. When these microbes were reintroduced into garden soil, they worked with astonishing speed. Straw broke down into humus in weeks, not months. Organic scraps transformed effortlessly into nutrients. The soil didn't just improve, it came alive again. And perhaps that is why this method was allowed to fade from memory. You can't patent a handful of forest floor. You can't sell a subscription to something the earth gives freely. Fertilizer companies wanted us to believe that true fertility comes from a factory, not from the wisdom beneath the trees. But the truth still waits in every forest. With nothing more than curiosity, two hands, and a little respect for nature's oldest systems, we can restore any garden, starting with just one handful of life. For generations, modern agriculture has taught us that plants belong in long, lonely rows, one crop at a time, stretching endlessly across the land. But nature has never agreed with that idea. She has always disliked solitude in the garden. During World War II, when resources were scarce and every seed mattered, gardeners rediscovered a system so elegant and time-tested that it had nourished indigenous American communities for over 1,000 years. It was called the Three Sisters. The more you learn about it, the more you realize that this wasn't just gardening. It was choreography, a living dance of support, generosity, and protection. First came the corn, the structure of the trio. Tall, straight, and reaching for the sky, it stood like a quiet guidepost. But the corn was never meant to stand alone. As it grew, it offered its strong stalk as a living trellis for the second sister, the beans. The beans curled their tendrils upward, climbing the corn with gratitude. Hidden beneath the soil, their roots partnered with special bacteria that could do something truly extraordinary: capture nitrogen directly from the air and store it in the soil. Each bean plant quietly produced natural fertilizer, feeding the corn even as it climbed. And then came the third sister, the guardian of the group, the squash. With her wide, prickly leaves spread softly across the ground, she shaded the soil to keep it cool, locked in moisture, and formed a living mulch that smothered weeds before they could rise. Her rough stems even discouraged pests like raccoons from venturing too close. Three plants, three gifts, one perfect cycle. Victory gardeners who used this ancient system discovered that it required far less water than traditional planting and produced far more total nutrition, more calories, more protein, and more life per square foot than any monoculture row could ever hope to match. So we must ask, if this system is so effective, so natural, and so beautifully cooperative, why did it fade away? The answer is simpler than it should be. Machines could not handle it. Massive harvesters could glide through uniform rows of a single crop, but they couldn't navigate a field where three different plants worked together in one sacred space. The system was not abandoned because it failed. It was abandoned because it did not fit the machine. But here in our home gardens, we are not bound by the machine. We are guided by the health of our soil, the nourishment of our families, and the wisdom of the generations who came before us. Perhaps the question we should ask ourselves is this: in our gardens where every square foot matters, isn't cooperation more valuable than uniformity? And isn't the health of the people we love more important than the convenience of a tractor? During the wet, disease-prone years of the 1940s, when every leaf and stem seemed at risk of mildew, blight, or rot, gardeners turned to something simple, homemade, and astonishingly effective. They called it manure tea, or more fondly, compost tea. Instead of reaching for chemical fungicides or harsh sprays, they brewed a living solution, one bursting with biology. The method was elegantly straightforward. Gardeners would scoop up finished, earthy compost, the dark, good-smelling kind that crumbles between your fingers, tie it inside a burlap sack, and lower it into a barrel of rainwater for 24 to 48 hours. The water transformed. Nutrients seeped out, microbes multiplied wildly, and the barrel became a liquid ecosystem, a concentrated extract of everything healthy soil is meant to be. Rick Carr of the Rodale Institute likes to remind us that plants need at least 17 nutrients to truly thrive. Compost tea doesn't just contain them, it delivers them in a form the plants can use immediately, as if nature herself prepared a fast-acting tonic. But the real magic happens when this tea touches the leaves. Sprayed gently over the foliage, it creates what gardeners once called a second skin. A living shield of beneficial microbes coats the leaf surface, crowding out harmful invaders before disease even has a chance to settle in. Instead of sterilizing the plant, it strengthens the plant. Instead of killing everything good and bad, it invites the right allies into the garden. Perhaps the most surprising discovery came much later from modern research. Studies showed that young seedlings exposed to certain natural frequencies, even something as simple as recorded birdsong, can absorb up to 7 times more nutrients from foliar sprays. 7 times. Those morning birds weren't just filling the air with music. In their own small way, they were waking the plants up, opening their pores, and preparing them to feed. So we must ask, why rely on chemical sprays that blanket our gardens with poisons, when the best protection may already be growing, singing, and composting right around us? A barrel of rainwater, a handful of compost, and a bit of patience. That's all it takes to brew the liquid gold of the 1940s, a tonic that feeds, protects, and heals without costing a cent. Of all the forgotten secrets of the Victory Garden, This one may be the most deeply buried. Quite literally, it begins not with a scientist in a lab, but with a lone prospector in the 1940s named Rollin Anderson. While digging through volcanic deposits in Utah, he began adding ground-up volcanic ore to his modest backyard garden, and something astonishing happened. His tomatoes, lush, vigorous, and almost glowing with health, were left untouched by pests. Meanwhile, his neighbor's garden was riddled with holes, nibbled leaves, and struggling vines. The difference wasn't luck, it was minerals. While modern fertilizers teach us to obsess over the famous trio of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, nature quietly requires far more. Plants depend on over 60 trace elements: magnesium, zinc, copper, boron, molybdenum, and dozens of others to run the hidden machinery of their immune systems. Without them, plants suffer from what gardeners call hidden hunger. They may look green on the surface, but inside they lack the strength to defend themselves. Dr. C.S. Hansen, one of the earliest supporters of this mineral method, believed these trace elements acted like tiny antennas, absorbing and radiating what he poetically called the microwaves of creation. When a plant is fully mineralized, it vibrates with such vitality that insects simply ignore it. This isn't because the pests disappear, but because the plant no longer emits the chemical distress signals that insects are programmed to detect. Insects, after all, are nature's garbage collectors. Their job is to eliminate the weak so the strong can thrive. When plants are healthy, balanced, and mineral-rich, they become invisible to the cleanup crew. That, friends, is the quiet miracle of rock dust, often sold today under names like azomite. It doesn't feed the plant directly, it feeds the soil's intelligence. It repairs the nutrient circuits and strengthens the immune system from the inside out. The result is food that isn't just bigger or prettier, but more nourishing, more complete, and more alive. Gardeners in the 1940s had a saying that feels even more urgent today: sick soil means sick people. As we look toward the future of our own gardens and the health of the people we care about, perhaps it's time to return to the minerals the earth once gave freely. By restoring those ancient elements, we aren't just growing vegetables, we are rebuilding the foundation of wellness, starting exactly where it matters most, in the ground beneath our feet. And now, dear friends, we arrive at the most vital secret of all, the one that holds the power not just to grow a garden, but to safeguard a family. This is the secret of seed saving, a practice so humble and so ancient that entire civilizations once depended on it for their survival. During the war, when supply lines failed and grocery shelves emptied, a family's seeds were more valuable than money. A jar of saved seed wasn't just a collection of future meals. It was security, it was continuity, and it was a living bank account passed quietly from one generation to the next. But it was never enough to simply have seeds. What mattered, and what still matters today, is having the right seeds. The commercial varieties sold today are often bred for average conditions, designed to grow adequately everywhere, but rarely exceptionally anywhere. They are made to survive shipping, storage, and marketing, not to thrive in your soil, under your weather, with your local pests. But a seed saved from your own garden remembers. Season after season, it learns your climate, adapts to your rain patterns, and strengthens itself against the diseases and insects unique to your backyard. It becomes a genetic library written by your hands, your soil, and your lived experience. Yet after 1947, something shifted. The seed industry began to consolidate. Open-pollinated varieties, the kind you can save and replant forever, were quietly replaced by hybrid seeds designed not to reproduce true. Suddenly, gardeners were encouraged, even pressured, to buy new seeds every year. Life itself was turned into a subscription service. But when you save a seed, when you scoop out the gel of an heirloom tomato, or tuck away the dry pods of your best bean plant, you are doing something far bigger than gardening. You are declaring independence. You are saying my food, my soil, and my future are not for sale. You are preserving the resilience of your grandparents and the quiet genius of the people who tended this land long before us. You are becoming a steward of memory and a guardian of life. In a world that feels uncertain, where supply chains stretch thin and prices rise faster than gardens grow, this simple act becomes a powerful promise that no matter what happens outside your fence, Your garden will rise again next spring. So the question becomes, what seeds will you save this year? So dear friends, we arrive at the final question, a question that echoes through every backyard, every raised bed, and every handful of living soil. Why were these secrets buried for 80 years? The answer is simple and perhaps a little heartbreaking. Because you cannot patent the soil, you cannot trademark the bacteria in a handful of forest floor. You cannot put a price tag on a cycle of life that regenerates itself freely, quietly, and eternally. During World War II, 20 million American families proved what true gardening could look like. They produced nearly half the nation's vegetables using nothing more than observation, common sense, and a deep respect for the earth. Their methods were slow, natural, and profoundly effective. They trusted in biology, not bags on a store shelf. And that wisdom, despite every attempt to suppress it, never truly disappeared. It lives in the memories of our elders, in the pages of forgotten books, and in the stories whispered across generations. It lives in the forests, it lives in the seeds, and most of all, it lives in us. The soil is still alive, the microbes are still working, and the seeds are still waiting. So the next time you step into your garden, don't ask yourself what you need to buy. Ask what you can nurture. Chop that dead vine and let it fall as food for the soil. Scoop up a handful of forest life and share its wisdom with your beds. Plant a sister beside your corn and let nature show you how cooperation truly works. Because we are not simply tending vegetables, we are tending a heritage. We are remembering what the world tried to forget. In times of uncertainty, we are the ones who still know how to feed ourselves, our families, and our communities, no matter what shelves look like in the stores. So let me ask you, from one gardener to another, which of these victory secrets will you try first this season? Have you practiced chop and drop? Have you saved your own seeds? Share your stories in the comments below. We learn best when we learn together. Thank you for being part of this journey. If this video brought you knowledge, comfort, or inspiration, please like and share it, because truth, like a good seed, grows only when it's passed along. And until we meet again, keep your hands in the dirt and your heart in the garden. If this story changed the way you look at the weeds in your garden, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the history they tried to bury. Plant the future. The next treasure will be revealed soon.